Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Paths Uncovered, the podcast where we get to go and chat to people with untraditional pathways into technology. And today's guest, we've been meaning to get around to this, and I'm really excited because it's just one of those kind of coincidental meetings that kind of tend to happen. So I've got Liang with me today. Do you want to come in, Xin, and do a very quick introduction to yourself?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me. I'm Shin, and currently I am a machine learning engineer. Have been in the machine learning AI space for a little while now. I'm passionate about all things AI, all things software engineering, and the combination of both.
I love it. And for context for everyone listening in, this is I think possibly the funniest way that a guest has come onto the podcast, because me and Shin for the first time met, I think over a year ago, in a cultural round interview for where she used to work at one stage, because I was also going to be working there, I thought, for a while. And I was like, it was great. Like, don't get me wrong, the chat was absolutely great. Other things happened and it just didn't come through at that time. But me and Shin then ended up meeting maybe a month or two ago at these random drinks on a Friday night after work. And the whole time I was like, I swear I know this person. I don't know why I know this person. Melbourne's quite small, but how do I know her? And it turns out that's how I know her, is because she interviewed me, essentially. So this is a great little turnaround of let me interview you now. This will be fun.
Yes, indeed. I think we chat a lot more at the after work drink than the actual culture interview. So
That's also true. That's a very good point. We probably did actually have a better chat then than we actually in the official chats at that stage. But so I ended up chatting, and when I stalked her later, because I was like, why do I know her? I need to figure out how I know this person. And I was like, oh, actually, regardless of that, she's a great person to have on the podcast. So look, without further ado, let's just dive in and bring me back to kind of high school times. What was happening? What was the original career path that you thought yes, this is what I'm going to do? What was happening?
Yeah, sure. So high school, that's a little while ago. So I wasn't in Australia when I did high school. I was back home in China, and I probably the audience all know that in Chinese high school they're all very competitive, especially you need to be good at maths and STEM and physics and all engineering courses, if you can, because that's supposed to be the smart kid. I wasn't an exception of that. So I was actually a little bit of a mathematics. I attend maths competition, and kind of competing in China national maths competition, and then I did have some kind of achievements there, kind of like a third prize of a national maths competition, and I was in a physics specific class in high school, and it's all quite stressful, and just study and doing exams. So that's my high school. But at the back of that, I think what I wanted to do is quite different from what I was doing at the time. I always wanted to be a journalist, and the journalist that kind of foreign correspondence. So I want to go out in different countries and try to understand the culture and try to report the current affairs in those countries, especially in the war zones, because I don't know why, I just had this special kind of interest in in those current affairs, and I try to do my part to have to surface those issues and hopefully make the world a better place. That sounds cliche, but that's what I always wanted to do, a journalist, especially a foreign correspondent, especially, reporting current affairs. Yeah, so that's different from what I was doing, what I am doing now.
That is amazing. I'm sorry, actually, in context, when I think back to school, do you know what? I don't think I actually necessarily knew that that was a option in terms of a job that someone could do. But if I knew it, I feel that would 100% be something I would want to do. Just because I'm the travel, I get to see other places and see what's happening.
Exactly.
It sounds amazing.
I know, and if you could use that as privilege to kind of travel to places that you probably wouldn't be able to as a normal tourist, and because I don't know, you have special access, and you have be a diplomat or something like that. So yes, and they get to travel lots of places. That's definitely one of the main things that I wanted to be a foreign correspondent. Yeah, 100%.
That, oh God, sorry. Now I'm like, maybe I want a career change. Maybe I want to be a foreign correspondent
Still
now.
not too late.
Right? Sounds great. Maybe not in the war-torn areas now anymore because it's a little bit scary at the moment. But
Yeah.
sorry. Also, just to touch on the fact that like you very casually mentioned that you got third place at a national Chinese mathematics like. Excuse me, like that was a very casual brush under the carpet kind of a moment. I'm like, that's fabulous. Congratulations. Like, I don't even know where to go with that.
Thanks. That was like an unintentional humble brag, I suppose. Like I said, at the time, it's like at the back of my mind, because all my like high school friends, they're like really smart. They're all like kind of like at the the first and second prize. So for me, it's like third prize. I'm just like this little little book is like
Yeah.
I was just like mention it, but not not full with confidence because other people is all like first and second prizes.
Oh,
and
I
I'm
get
just
that.
like here.
I know, I completely. It's such an interesting thing, isn't it? Where it's like when you're in the moment, you're like, like it was only third, like it's fine. When you step out, like other people are just like, what the hell? Like, what is this? I completely understand that. It's such an interesting like shift of thing of like, wait, no, you're actually so smart.
It.
Like, oh my God, that's scary.
Well, thanks. Now I have like the confidence boost. I should use that more often, actually.
Oh, 100%. Oh my God, no, we're all about kind of those like humble brags. Like I like this place to be like, this is a nice place where you can be arrogant but in a good way. Like this is good. Tell me all about it. Like I want to hear it. I'm here for this. So you wanted to be, you were silently, passionately wanting to be a journalist. So what did end up happening? So you're graduating high school. Like what are we deciding to be? Do we end up going into journalism?
Yeah, so at the time, because I was trying to choose what to do for uni, what subjects, and it's like economy. That's quite like a really popular one back then, especially back home. And then engineering, doctor,
Yeah.
lawyer, all those, typical popular universities kind of like degrees, especially for like people from Chinese background. And then at the time, and journalism definitely not one of them.
Yeah.
So when back home, and I kind of like discussed with my parents, and especially my dad, because I think he contributed a lot in terms of my academic life. And funny enough, he was because he retired now. He was a professor at a university back home in China in electrical engineering. So makes sense for me to do electrical engineering. It's like. Okay, naturally, maybe, and it's a family tradition or whatever. And he always wanted me to go into like engineering and science and maths and all that. It's like, fine, I guess I'm okay at maths and I can do physics and I'm good at, the STEM subject. So I was like, oh, well, fine, electrical engineering. So that's how I kind of like chose to do electrical engineering for uni. And part of it because I guess I have the kind of like the background like with like engineering and maths and physics, and part of it because just my dad was also an electrical engineering professor. So yeah, might as well. I was like, sure, if I got stuck into any assignment, at least I could ask for help.
I was gonna say it's such a handy little like support system to have, especially in a degree like that where it's like it's not an easy place to be. So this is great. Like I think I remember it was kind of, I remember at one, I mean, I knocked out engineering in general very early on because dad's an engineer, and both of my older cousins, they both went and did engineering, and I was just like, and I think it was such an interesting thing of like, I never understood what it actually meant in terms of like real life jobs. I was like, okay, you're an engineer, but like you sit at work and you order parts. Like I don't understand how that's engineering. Like this makes no sense to me. I just never could comprehend what that would mean. So like very early on for me, I think it was the other way around where I was like, I refuse to be an engineer. I don't understand what this means. I will never do it. So like I feel like on purpose I just like didn't even do physics in like year 12. I was like, I refuse because I'm not gonna do this. But I mean, and then at the other end of it I was like, mom's a nurse, maybe I'll go into and be a doctor. I did the other end of it, didn't get in, thank God.
Yeah, it's funny enough that you kind of like refuse to do physics. So I kind of like when if your parents kind of like pressure you into doing engineering, it's like, well, I didn't do physics, I couldn't do
can't.
it, so yeah, I couldn't choose it. Yeah, I just can't.
I remember it was like
no pushback.
Exactly, because I mean, it was funny because like I was good at maths too. Like I liked maths, it made sense to me, and you could always pick, like, I think the way the Irish system worked was a little bit different. Like, you could pick you like the top 6 subjects got the total aggregate for your final grade, basically. So you could do as many subjects as you want, just your best 6 will be the ones counted. And I remember applied maths was a subject that not many people did, and I was like, oh, it's maths, like, I'll do that makes sense, like, of course it lines up. But like, applied maths is maths and physics, and like the maths of the physics, basically. But I didn't want to do physics. I think I was like one of like 5 people in the country who decided to do applied maths without doing physics, because it makes no sense without it. And I was like, yes, this was the level of like, I refuse to do physics, where I was like, I'll still do this where I really need it, but I will struggle my way through it. I really regret not doing physics, I think, in hindsight, and like everything else, it would have made things a lot easier. But coming back to electrical engineering, how was the degree? How did you find it?
So for that kind of like, it's funny enough that at university, that's like when, lots of people, especially, my high school friends, they started to decide, they started to kind of like study abroad. They decided to, I'm just going to go to the States, go to Australia, go to Canada, or like England, to study abroad. And as like everyone else, I came to Australia for university, especially electrical engineering. Actually, I wasn't in Melbourne, because I'm currently based in Melbourne now. But at the time, I did electrical engineering in the University of Queensland in Brisbane. And I spent, quite some time there. And yeah, so that was a huge change, like huge. Because I need to, came to a different country, live in like a totally different background, Australian background, and Chinese culture quite different. And also electrical engineering at UK was like damn hard, really hard.
Yeah.
And the biggest change is that kind of like, in China, when we do high school, it's all like study and exams, very like theoretical. But like when you came to UQ and did electrical engineering, that was like quite practical, like both like theoretical material as well as like a practical, hands-on project. There's a lot of like hands-on projects for a lot of subjects, and that was like a huge change for me. And I was like so not used to this at all. And I remember one time that I literally, because we have like team project. So how it works is that for electrical engineering, you have like a group project. So how it's allocated is kind of like random, or like decided by the faculty, that like 4 people just randomly assigned into one group, and then you're going to do a group project together. And that was like a whole subject for the semester. Like you don't do coursework for that subject. It's just purely hands-on project. From you design your electronic board to all the way to kind of like, you program it so that it will work in a certain way, and also assemble them together to become a physical electronic product. And that was like, that was the whole subject. And I remember like I was just so like scared walking into this like with like 3 other people that speaking a language that wasn't my first language. And I also have like found it a little bit challenging to just by communicating with them in a social level, let alone in a more like a professional level. And put that aside, and also I need to bring my kind of like knowledge, electrical engineering knowledge, into practice, and try to understand how we could apply this knowledge from the textbook to actually building a PCB board, or building a circuit, and try to code it into code onto the board to see how everything works. And my team members, they are like really, really great. They were like so smart, and they understand everything, and they probably start doing soldering when they were 7. Well, I started doing soldering when I was just like, a few days before, before the project started. It was very overwhelming. And I remember one time when I was actually in the middle of like a team project, and I had like discussion with the team members, and we have like, oh, okay, we decided this is how we going to tackle the project, and decide what everyone's going to do. Each of us would have our responsibility and have our work to contribute, to the project. And after that discussion, I literally just like ran to the Great Court, which is a grassy area in UQ. I sat there and I just like burst into tears. I was like, oh my God, I don't know what I'm doing. And I was like so scared. I was like, oh, what if I couldn't get this work and we'll let the team down? And I have no idea what I'm doing. How come everyone else was so smart? I was literally just like sitting there and then crying by myself for a few minutes until someone came to me and asked, are you okay? I was like, yeah, I'm okay. I'm okay. I'm just crying, but I'm okay. But yeah, that was like a very, still vivid memory in my brain. It's like at some point during that team project, I just cried a lot on a great chord. But yeah, so that was like a quite a unique experience for me to kind of like change from I mean moved from a different country to Australia, and then kind of like did this kind of group project with people that with different backgrounds compared to myself, and they are actually way smarter than myself. So yeah, that was a great that was an interesting experience. Not sure whether I would go through it again, but I have no regrets going through that. So
Or like, as in, I mean, so when group projects in the first place, just like mind bending. Honestly, it's just such an irritating thing. Especially when it's like this random, like, nah, these are four people to figure it out. Like, I'm like, at least like put some thought behind why you're creating teams the way you are. Because I remember, and I'm like, this is like straight away for you. Like for us, I remember in fourth year, like so 4 years with the same like 50 odd people in our degree, we got put into like group projects, and it was so interesting. And I wonder though, in terms of, it might have been easier in first year, I think, because no one really knew each other. But 4 years in, you kind of have your own groups of friends, and like everyone knows each other and everyone knows what everyone's like. For then to get like, for us to be put into like these randomized group, it was weird, honestly. And I was like, and this is, I mean, everyone in this year, like, everyone in my degree was essentially Irish. Like we all grew up the same. Like we all, at least we didn't have all the struggles of like the extra things to add on to it, right? God, I remember that. It was just so hard. Like I can't imagine having to go through that with everything else added on. Like I did the whole moving to the whole different country at a later stage where it was very separate. At least it was like one thing at a time. Like God, fair play to yourself for having. Honestly, everyone needs to cry every so often. Like it is what it is. Like it's kind of nice. And like I cried a lot in 4 years. I'm not gonna lie. Like the degree anything like mathematical or like STEM included. As much as I'm like, yes, oh my God, don't get me wrong, it's great, do the degrees. Also get prepared to cry a lot.
yeah,
but in the nicest way. Like, as in, I would recommend it, but also just be prepared for the other sides of it. Like, it is hard. Sometimes a cry is just what you need at the end of a day. You're like, yes, I just needed to get that out. I can go back now.
yeah, it's like a stress relief, and I kind of like, I don't know. To me, it is an okay way to cope with it. Otherwise, like I would have like internalized it and would probably cause, I don't know, make it might cause some mental health issue. But at least I kind of like just like let it all out and just like let it go, and it's like a once-off thing. And then later on, I felt much better after I'm just like
Exactly
for like 10 minutes, and I was like, I'm good, and I was just like finished crying, pack my bag, went to grab lunch, and then back to the lab. That's what happened. And it's like, get it done quickly. But so that was interesting. And funny enough, that because I was the first team project, it was in like second year or something. And in the fourth year, there's another team project I had to go through. But at that point, I guess it's a different challenge, because I think at UQ it's funny that because apparently a lot of people dropped out of electrical engineering after the first team projects, because that's like really as like a filter to filter out people that might lose interest or might not really think that electrical engineering are for them. And then so that's like the first filter, and the second filter was like this team project 2. That's what we call it, team project 2. And then again, you kind of like randomly assign a group of people together, and that was based on GPA, which is the grade at UQ or in university. So based on GPA, and my GPA was okay because I think I was just like naturally good at exam because I was trained to be good at exam back from high school. So I was okay at exams, so I got a good grade. But then, when they kind of allocated people based on their grade for the second team project, and that got added an extra kind of like challenge to it because people here with good grades, they're like really good for both like, exams and theoretical sort of things and also hands-on stuff. And, they probably build things on their own, and their own time, and also kind of like, do the, I don't know, their part-time job, and they start like building things, and they probably start their own little, back then we didn't call it startup, it was like their own thing to kind of like build stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, then I went to like second team project, like, oh, another one. But yeah, that was, at least I knew what to expect at the time, so it's like it was not as bad as the first one, but yeah, still.
Yeah. So
Yeah, so that, yeah, sorry.
no, yes, like that. God, I'm like trying to like. I think the expectation part is such an interesting thing, where everything seems so much easier when you actually understand what the expectations are, and it's just so hard to figure those out 90% of the time in a scenario where, especially where things are new, you're like, I don't know what the hell my expectations will be of this. How low do I set it? And if I set it too low, like everything else is going wrong because it was meant to be so much higher. It's such an interesting like mix of how do you figure the scenario out and like set yourself up for it?
Yeah, definitely. And also like the uncertainty that adds to it, because like it's a big part. Because like in the hindsight, probably wasn't that bad, but it just at the time you don't know what you don't know. You don't know what to expect. You don't know what's happening. It's that uncertainty that's kind of like weighing a lot in terms of like, stress, and kind of like, the me being like scared about, what happened next. But yeah, that's a good learning experience, and now definitely teach me, better to cope with that uncertainty in a later stage. But yeah, so that's like kind of like team project definitely is a highlight of my uni life. And then later on, I guess I also did some kind of like it's still kind of like a project or hands-on project type of, less so of a team project like me alone, like mini thesis. And kind of I was like interested in doing some of those kind of like semi-research type, but also kind of like, do some research and then build a little prototype of a little product. I guess at that time I kind of like got the hang of it, and I felt like, oh, this seems to be something that's super useful, and it's going to be great maybe for like either for like, job hunting or for later on in my career. So at the time I thought maybe I could, do a little bit more on this hands-on project, as a combination of both like theoretical side of things as well as like hands-on practice. So yeah, I also did a little bit of like mini project during uni, and I found it super useful. And I would have done more of those, because I think those things, those subjects teach me a lot more than just, textbook based courses.
Yeah.
Of course, like, you're going to set a foundation, the theory side of things, but at a certain point that you probably need to apply those into more like hands-on things. So yeah, I really enjoyed those like we call it mini thesis, a research project. But yeah, definitely highly recommend, even like someone like, still, trying to figure things out. And those are definitely, very, very valuable, I would say.
Oh, for sure. I remember in fourth year, like that group project thing, that was the statistical consulting module. And I honestly haven't met a single person who has graduated from my degree that wouldn't say the fact that that was the best and most valuable module of the 4 years of a degree, because it was I mean, you can learn all your statistical modules, and you learn how like maths works and how like analysis and all these like theorems and everything line up together, but that module was like, here's a real life person who has got a problem, and it's like these really niche like specific areas, and you need to be able to go and like they give you the data, and you have to figure out what the hell to do with it, and then you have to communicate that back. And we're all just like, oh my god, there's a reason to the madness, there's a reason to what we've learned over the last 4 years. And it's like those kind of anything related, any little bit that relates back to real life in any module, you're like, oh my god, that was the best one.
Yeah, definitely. Because like the one that I did was to build a system, like a pretty prototype system, to figure out how to deal with like multiple RFID tags. So essentially, just like so I have this like device, kind of like a card reader, and then what happened if I have like 3 or more than 3 RFID tags, and to kind of like put to tag put near the tag readers, and whether I would be able to kind of like read all this card, read all the tags separately, and figure out which one is which. And in a real world kind of like scenario is like, for example, like in Melbourne, there's like, when you go on a public transport, you have Mikey, and then you tap,
Yeah.
you put it into the reader. And what if like multiple people just put their Mikey at the same time? And then like whether the reader can, it's able to, figure out which card is which and how much like they need to deduct. So that was kind of like the little project that I did. And I learned a lot. Or it was quite challenging, so, but I learned a lot, from kind of like, how do you do, communications and signal processing, and how do you divide, kind of separate the signals from a blob of like, signals from multiple cards, and then a whole lot of things, and how to make it work fast, in a practical sense, like how do I make sure that it could read fast enough, and it could also do the processing fast enough, so that the reading of the RFID tags are in real time, and all that's kind of like make you think a lot more than you just like theoretically just do some maths and try to separate the signals. So this is like a quite interesting thing. And at the time I think also that my no my what do they call it, supervisor, my supervisor was like a really good kind of like a communication professor, like professor kind of like teaching signal communications and all that, and he has all this kind of like experience and be able to kind of like guide me through, and also he literally because when I first got into this subject, I was like, why do we want to do this, like what was the use case, and then he would be able to kind of articulate like why do we want to do this, and what's like real world use cases. And when he mentioned about the Mikey reading scenarios, of like, oh yeah, there's lots of like, it's important. This project is important. I better get it working, so that no one gets kind of like charged when they go on a bus like unfairly. So yeah, so that's like kind of like a good real world kind of like well, it's just like a project that it can be applied to the real world. So yeah, I found it super interesting.
Sorry, even as you explained that, I'm like, RFIDs, oh my god, my phone, how does it figure out which card I'm trying to tap down? When I've put down like my phone, it could be like 18 different cards on it.
Exactly, yeah.
And I'm like, literally listening to this, I'm like, this is so useful. My statistical consulting project was about cows. Like, I'm like, will I ever need that? I don't know. But this sounds a lot more interesting.
Yeah, it was like I was lucky enough to actually be on like the project that's like it's quite interesting, and it's like I can relate to it a lot because I use that every day to go on a bus.
Exactly. So talk to me about what was the thinking. So were you planning to become, and this kind of goes back to, I think I mentioned this, where I'm like, I don't know what engineers actually do in real life in terms of work. Like, what was the thing? Like, what were the plans then for graduating? It was like, do you wanted to do more consulting? Did you want to do more masters in research and stuff? Or what? Yeah, what was kind of the job hunting prospect, I think?
Yeah. So funny enough, during the my undergrad, and then for engineering we need to do industrial projects for like 60 days or something to be able to graduate. So what it means is that you need to find an internship or a research institute that you need to either work there for 60 days, or you need to have like some kind of a research outcome for 60 days to be able to graduate from from an electrical engineering degree. And for me, I was like pretty lucky to be introduced to a smaller company. A small company in Brisbane. It's a mining technology company. Because in Queensland, there's not like mining industry is huge there. But
Yeah.
the company that I worked for to get my internship credit was a small mining technology company. So it's not a mining company, but they produce kind of a technology like monitoring system or kind of any optimization system for the mining machine. And they sell those systems to the mining company. So I was lucky enough to introduce into this company as like a intern, and the kind of like product, to be like a product engineer. And it was all kind of like by chance, and because at the time, because as an international student, I was like worried that I would be able to get a job, and I want to stay in Australia, and all those kind of like worried about your career, your job hunting, and all that. But then that was a good start, at least. I really like compared to my other international student friends, I was at least a step forward.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I stayed there. And pretty much what I did is like kind of like develop some pretty basic algorithm to filter out some of the signals collected from the system, and because the system was like installed on a big mining machine, and then pretty much like the system would just collect all the signals like voltage and current and where the GPS position of the machine and how the machine swings and move and all that. So pretty much what I did was to kind of like come up with some basic algorithms and to filter out the signals and then to code it into the system. So I was writing C++ and then C and all the all the basic kind of like programming language. And at that time I realized, okay, so I did electrical engineering for a reason, and all of those I would be able to apply what I learned from uni to the real world, to the actual system that will go alive or will be in production on somewhere in central Queensland on a a machine in central Queensland.
Yeah.
It would have something that I wrote. So I was like, oh, this is great. Yeah, so that was like kind of an internship, and then it seems to be working pretty well for me and for the company. And then they kind of like decided to extend kind of like my contract, and they asked me whether I would like stay for, as like full-time employee. I was like, yeah, sure, fine. That's great. And then at the time also the company participant in a kind of, they call it Australia Research. Oh, I can't remember. It's a mining research institute. And they also want to develop kind of like do research and work with the institute, get some funding, and so that hopefully we could do some industry research and then produce some outcomes that can be introduced into the system. So yeah, again, I was like lucky enough to be able to participate in such like industrial research project, and I also have a UQ professor that will be able to guide me. So how it works essentially is that I have a UQ professor kind of as my kind of academic supervisor, and then my company is actually the CEO as my industry partner supervisor, and me as the researcher. So the three parties like combined together to participate in this research project funded by I think it's the Australian Coal Association Research Project. I think, yeah. So, and the acronyms are ACOP. So I was like lucky enough to participate in the research project as kind of like part of my employment with the mining technology company. And also at the time, my academic supervisor also think that that would be a good project for a master in philosophy degree. Essentially, it's a master research degree. So there's lots of things happening together to combine, so that in summary is that I was able to kind of like work as a full-time product engineer in this mining technology company, and meanwhile doing a master in philosophy. Master of Philosophy in Engineering degrees. It's a lot of
Jeez,
like
yeah,
names.
a lot of words there.
A lot of words there. So they call it MPhil. Essentially, it's a master in research degree. Nothing to do with philosophy. It's all engineering. Don't get it confused. But it's all about master in research. So yeah, so that was me. After my undergrad, I was able to do a master in research master degree while working full time. So that was like pretty good. And also I got like scholarships, and the project was funded by the by ACOP. So it's like great. It sounds like
it's the best of all worlds.
Yeah, exactly. It's just like the best of like everything. I got a degree, I got a full-time job, and my degree got funded. It was great.
This is literally sounds absolutely great. Like everything really did line up, and especially I think it's such a kind of, not enough people think about the fact that like, yes, oh my god, you've made such an effort to come out and like do an international degree, but like the stress of having to find a job after, it's just immense. Like as in when things like this work out, it's real big relief, I think, from the context of everything.
Yeah, it was like a huge relief, because I think looking for a job, because like a few ways, right, for people, international students to stay in Australia, either you get a full-time job like and then go sponsored by the companies, or you stay and do a master's to kind of like prolong your stay. Well, That's part of it.
Yeah.
Part of course, you're gonna, learn some knowledge from university, from the degrees. And yeah, and then so that you could, hopefully you could increase your chance to kind of like stay or like look, find
Get a
a job
job.
that you
Yeah.
like to do. But yeah, and I got, and if you're lucky enough, you got the funded to do your master or like a PhD, for example. But yeah, I was lucky enough to actually get all
Get
those
both of
three
them.
together at one go. Yeah, so that was great. That was great.
This is actually
Again,
great.
so
You know what? This is like
yeah,
explaining to me what an engineer would actually do in a real life job. So this is great. Thank
yeah,
you. Like, really appreciated that.
no worries. And I guess the perks of that job also is that because of the mining industry. So even though I'm just like coding some algorithms into a system that will be deployed on the mine on the machine, but also get to actually go on a mine site and go on those like big heavy mining machine, to kind of like, to understand how it works so that I could create better algorithm. That's the context of it. And I did go to a Central Queensland mine site and went on those like big mining machine called drag line. So they kind of like rotate 360 degrees and try to dig, get rid of the dirt above the cold layer and then to the big cold layer. But anyway, the perk is that yeah, I went to a mine site, went on those machines, even though it made me feel dizzy, but at least I could say that I went on it and also went underground mine sites as well. So that was like a unique experience. That was probably the only time I would do that in my life. But I got the
That's
experience,
so
so
fun.
I'm
I love how
grateful.
like it went from I really want to be able to travel for like foreign correspondent. Still got to do that, just a very different context of it.
Yep.
I love it. So talk to me about how that job went and kind of when you kind of knew it was time to wrap up. Like, how was that whole experience?
Yeah. So I like I like what I did in the job because it was more or less like what I would like to do, in terms of doing some creating algorithm, optimize the machine's operations, and also get to deal with data. That's probably the introduction for me to go into machine learning, but not quite just yet. Just like deal with data and all that. And yeah, and I got to went on a conference in Alaska and got lots like do. I had a lot of like different unique experience through the job, um, but and also to a point that I was always the only female in a room, whether it's on the mine site or in the office or doing like technical work, and that helped me to learn that what it feels like to be just the odd like standing out from everyone else and to be the unique person in the room, and I enjoyed all of that. And then to a point, however, it's the main thing about the job is because of the industry. I really don't um, like how mining is so not like environmental friendly. It's just not sustainable, and yeah, and just like that's not where I want to be. And it also feels like, especially from a technology point of view, even though like, the company I work for, they were like great, they're doing like great products, but still feel like it's a little bit behind. It's like traditional, it's a bit too traditional or like conventional, yeah, and just feel like a little bit not super forward thinking in a
Yeah.
way from an environment environmental point of view as well as a technology point of view. So I was like, I need to do something else in my life. And so yeah, and then I decided I want to do a little more towards like the software side of things because I've been programming, developing algorithms, and I've been dealing a lot of like data stuff like signals and data, and I enjoy that, and I would like to be able to use things that I learned or like from uni and stuff to kind of like get insight or like to kind of develop some kind of like smart data or like data intelligence, and pretty much. And also I wanted to probably do a little bit more on the software side, instead of like going to mine side all the time. So funny enough is that I always know that I wanted to leave, but I don't know where to go, and especially at the time my kind of a programming skills probably not that great. So and out of like the coincidence, I went to this event. It is called a Startup Catalyst event. So it is not so Startup Catalyst. It is a program that I think they kind of encourage, well, not really encourage, it's kind of like have a program for like university students or probably like people in the early career to join, and so that they will, especially in the technology field, and they will be able to kind of like organize a trip to Silicon Valley and to kind of like explore see the tech scene in Silicon Valley and visit all this like big tech company and to understand what it's like to be an entrepreneur and how you could if you want to start your own startup, how it could be one. And so they have like this program to teach like entrepreneurship and building, starting your own startup and all this, especially in tech. And I was not part of the program, but my partner was. So I tag along to this kind of like Startup Catalyst event. And at the time, there's like a founder of a startup was actually giving a talk and also trying to recruit people from this event. And then I just stumbled upon to this founder, and I just had a chat with her. And then she's like, seems to be great. You had the interest, some background. You want to send me your resume? I was like, yeah, of course, I will send you my resume. And yeah, and I sent her my resume. And yeah, and I got a job interview and everything just like went through really quickly, and I got a job in this startup, which is a image search engine for trademark and patent. So, and yeah, so it was just like out of like nowhere. I was like, yeah, I'm ready to jump.
Yeah.
And yeah, and I just like went to join this startup at the time to be just a software developer.
That is so funny. Do you know what the funniest thing is?
Yeah.
Literally, this is probably the third podcast that someone's talked about the startup, like the Silicon Valley trip thing.
Right.
It's like literally two other people have actually done it, and like Emily Casey, I think that was the last episode we released. She did that too, and I was like, oh my god, Emily, I swear someone else has been on the podcast talking about this before, and I'm like, what are the chances that there's another person talking about the same it's so like, and this kind of goes back to how small the tech industry really is. Like, you'll find the exact same experiences very quickly. But the thing that leads to is like the connections are very easy in that context of like, just go out there and I'm sure you'll be able to find like someone out there ready to chat to you about something like that. Yeah,
it literally just like go out there and just like be ready to seize the opportunity, because like they won't find you, you're gonna find them. And exactly. That's the thing, because I just go out there and present yourself and just chat to people, and you'll never know like what kind of like amazing opportunity that you would get. And I love that job. That was like probably the best job I've ever had. I learned so much. It was a smaller team, but we got along so well together, and we tackle like crazy interesting problem. And because like at that job, I literally learned everything that set up the foundation of my career to date, like full stack web development, and then back end and front end, and then I also get to because it's an image search engine product, so they also kind of like hire postdoc like computer vision researchers, and so like all these like very smart people to join this startup, and I got to learn from each one of them. So I get to do as I say, like full stack, back end, front end, and then computer vision. That is like the kind of like the starting point of me going into like machine learning and deep learning, because I learned so much from this like computer vision postdoc researchers, and he was great. And also because it's a smaller team, I also get to learn a lot of like different things in terms of like running a startup, like marketing and sales and all that. So that was amazing. That was like an amazing experience. Like I just learned everything I need for my career later on. So that was great. Because I guess at that point I also was a bit new to the modern software development and the tech scene. So I was like a sponge. I was ready to absorb and absorb everything that anyone was like ready to teach me. So that was great. Yeah.
It's so like, I remember I'm a big fan and proponent for recommending working at smaller places, and it's because of that. Like, I think it makes such a difference. Like, I mean, don't get me wrong, the big like the Googles and the Microsofts of the world are great. Like, there's a lot to be learned there, but it's so hard to find the people to learn from. Whereas when you're in like a 50 odd people place, you're like, well, hi, I'm here, everyone knows me, what do I want to know? And I say that because the amount of like software dev things I have never in my life done software development. Like all of my tech like data science stuff that I learned was like learned on the job. Everything I learned on the job.
Yeah.
And the amount of like software dev stuff that kind of comes up, and I know just because I'm surrounded by software developers and they would talk about it, I would just be like, okay, I kind of understand it because they've talked about it so much. Like authentication, like someone at work did a prezo, and I was like, right, okay, I kind of get what that means. I see how that works. Like, it's so funny because I still have like a lot of software dev friends, and they will talk things, and I'm like, yeah, I can follow this conversation along now, even though I've never in my life had anything to do with this.
Yeah, that's quite interesting, because like it just reminds me of like how you learn a new language, just like human language.
Yes.
How you learn it? You just go into the country and then listen to how other people talk, and talk to each other, and then you pick it up. And same like in the tech scene, you learn the programming language, but in the tech language, you just like you are surrounded by those people. They're smart and they just like talk about these things, and you just pick things up. Yeah, 100%.
Exactly. Oh, like. Just go find a room which is like full of people that are smarter than you, and you'll be fine.
yeah, exactly. So that's kind of like my principle in terms of like how I drive my career. Just like be surrounded by people that's way smarter than you. You would feel big imposter syndrome. You just have to cope with it. Because you will be great. You will be like much better off to be surrounded by people than you are the best in the room. 100%. So yeah, that's another thing. I always wanted to be surrounded by smart people. I'm happy to be like the dumbest in the room, 100%.
Like, it's enjoyable then. It's like, well, I can ask the stupid questions because I am the dumbest person here. This is great.
yeah. I have like nothing to lose. So,
Exactly. I'm like, well, I am who I am. We'll deal with it.
Yeah, embrace it.
So you're thriving at the image recognition stuff now. You're like starting to learn a lot more of the machine learning. What's happening next? Is this a case of like, well, machine learning is where I want to be? Like, is that where we're stepping away from software dev?
Yeah, so like I just at the point I realized, oh my god, this is amazing. And then you train a neural net, like deep learning neural network with some previous image, and then it will be able to predict like simple examples of where's a cat or a dog, but more than that, we're able to segment the image and recognize the object on the image. It was fascinating. It was like magic. And then at that point I was like, this really is something that I'm really passionate about. So I kind of like steer myself towards from just like a web dev towards more and more like the machine learning and the deep learning side of things. But at the time, I also realized that because it was a small startup, we need to get things out into production quickly. It's including the deep learning models and stuff. And I realized that I don't really just want to do building the model and all that. I want to see it working, especially in our search engine. At the time, there's an image search engine, or anywhere that's actually in production live, and I could see it working. I like that feeling to see things working into production. That just, I don't know, that just gives me it's just something
it's like I did that.
Yeah,
exactly.
Like,
I did that.
Yeah, and it's working. Everyone else knows that it's working, and I did that, and it gives me the kicks. So I want to be in the field and doing the machine learning stuff, but also I wanted to make sure that those work would get into production and it's working, so everyone else can use it, or like use it, be able to benefit from it. So that's like a key point for me. What I learned is that need to get the cool things out into production so everyone else can benefit from it. And yeah, so that's like kind of like my thinking at the time. But then I was still in Brisbane. And so after a little while, that was kind of like more, less so of the career side, but more like a personal side, that my partner and I decided to explore a new city. Because Brisbane's relatively small compared to other big cities in Australia. And then we decided, we should, take more adventure for our life, especially when we were still young. And then we decided to move down to Melbourne, just because of the weather and also because of the sports that my partner likes, is AFL. Anyway, so we moved down to Melbourne, and I also kind of, I got a job, and I joined another startup, which does kind of a speech analytics engine, to develop speech analytic engines. So I was like, great because I've done image, I've done computer vision, and then I kind of like, oh, maybe I should move on to something different. For example, like speech or audio, or also like text and like
Yeah.
natural language. So that's like another area that I haven't really explored. But I also has passion to it. Yeah, so I just like joined another startup, and that was an interesting experience because I think the product was written in Haskell, which is like a quite yeah, it is a really niche language. It's a functional programming language, which is different from the other object oriented um, programming language. And so from a language programming language point of view, it was like that was like a whole new level of like programming, and I wasn't a great programmer, and this thing is like a new language and this new paradigm to learn this language. It's because it's functional programming, and also in a kind of like a machine learning, a deep learning space. It was just like it's all this kind of like different pieces that don't seem like they would go well together, but somehow it exists in this startup. And I was just like, this is like another kind of like experience. I got to learn with like, from again, a bunch of like really smart people. They're really good at Haskell and also doing functional programming for a while. And they were just like super smart. And I learned so much about functional programming as well as Haskell as a language. And also more importantly, is conceptually like the paradigm of how, functional programming works. And it changed the way of me thinking about programming. The key thing about this is that it kind of like it can kind of like program in a way that's very elegant and precise and succinct. So in other language like Python, I have to write, I don't know, like 20 lines of code to do a certain things, but in Haskell or like functional programming, it probably can be reduced to like 3 to 5 lines. It's just really succinct, really precise, and it's beautiful, and it changed the way of me thinking about programming.
Yeah.
But yeah, so but the hard thing is that because like as I said before, that I want to get cool things into production that I can be benefit from other people, and Haskell is not quite that because it was like it was quite tricky to actually get things into production in that language, in my opinion at least. 'Cause, like again, I was just like a newbie for that language. Well, yeah, that was an interesting experience. And see how in terms of like learning a new language and then the new kind of like a paradigm, and also do explore the new space in machine learning, which is natural language processing and also like audio processing. And this different kind of a challenge compared to computer vision. But yeah, I just got to explore that, and kind of like gain a whole new set of skills as well as experience. Yeah, I enjoyed it very much in terms of like the experience, and also I moved down to Melbourne as a new city as well. And now that I think about it, I always have this like new things all happen at one go in my life. It's interesting.
I like that. Like I love
it.
how it's like realizing something new about yourself because you're talking about it on the
Yeah.
pod. You're like, oh wait,
Oh wait.
what am I
Yeah.
doing?
I always look like new things in different areas, and we'll combine
Yeah.
together to form
Everything new
a
in
new
one go. I
experience.
like
Yeah.
it. I'm like me and
Yeah.
Maddie, so I'm like, I'll try things new. Like I'm great. I'm like I'll enjoy that, but at least I take it one at a time. Like Shane, you're just going straight into it with like 100 things at the same time. Interesting move. And I feel like
Yeah.
you might be the first person I've heard say they moved from Brisbane to Melbourne for the weather instead of the other way
Yeah.
around, which is the funniest thing I think.
Yep, 100%. Because when I was in Brisbane, I kind of talked to many people that from Melbourne, like, oh, this weather's good, Melbourne's weather sucks. And then when I came to Melbourne, when I talked to people, it was like, oh, I want to move to Queensland because the weather here sucks. I was like, I moved down for the weather.
It's literally like the other way around. But I mean, the other end of it is like I don't think I could survive in the humidity that like Brisbane gets, and it gets a bit too hot for me. I think I'm like,
It,
no, like Melbourne sucks at times, but you know what? It's okay. I'm okay with it.
yeah, it's because it's like up there. It's humid and hot. It's like an oven, and it's like not escapable. At least in
Yeah,
Melbourne, if it's like super hot, but if you go under the tree in the shade, you are
it gets
fine.
better. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, I love
Yeah,
it. And like, did the footy play out? Like, did you get to go to a lot more footy matches?
yes,
Surely.
yes. And technically, I am I'm a member. I'm an AFL member technically because I paid the membership. Even though in the last like few years, like we couldn't go because of COVID, but I
Yes.
I was still a member, so I can claim that I am a fan of AFL, even though I don't know whether it's
Wait,
my
what
choice or
team is
not.
it
But
now?
so I did get to choose. Well, of course I
Yep.
freely, but I chose a team which is a Melbourne Demon. When I first came down, because my old boss asked that you can go to Melbourne, you can leave the company, you can go to Melbourne, but on a condition that you need to be a Melbourne supporter. I was like, fine, deal. But now I just like follow my partner because he is a Geelong
Oh,
supporter,
you're a
so
Geelong
I
person.
support
We're a
Geelong.
Richmond family. We were at the match last night, which is why I was asking. It's funny.
Oh, love
But
it.
yeah, like I think anyone listening in, like I mean, if you're thinking about moving to Melbourne, it is very important that you have your footy team sorted before you move to Melbourne. Like, I mean, you gotta research the stuff, like gotta figure this out, gotta find your teams.
Yep, that's how you're gonna fit into Melbourne.
Exactly. It's
You're gonna
number
have a
one.
team criteria.
So you've already, oh my god, you've done so much already that I'm just like trying to keep up now. So we've done computer vision, we've done speech recognition, we've done all these different things. What was next?
Yeah. So and now I just realized I've been in the startup product for a little while, and maybe I would try something new, which is consultant. I've
Yeah.
never done that. So yeah, so and then I joined a boutique consultant, that's the word, a boutique consultancy in Melbourne. And where I interviewed you
Yep.
by coincidence. And yeah, so I was just like joined that, and it was definitely a interesting, again, a new experience for me because like back in the product space, you kind of like gonna see how you build things, how to develop things, and how what technology you use, what's kind of like cool things that you do from a technology point of view. And when I moved to consultant, I slowly realized that technology and the tech stack is part of it, but it's not all of it. And there's like it's almost like in my brain, there's like half of it's like technology, technical um, capability, and then the other half I realized I haven't really developed properly until I went into consultant, which is more towards kind of a business side, like how what you do, or kind of like what value you created to to your clients by doing a certain things. And it's not about whether it's a cool tech that you should do and because it is cool so that we do it. It's not like that really.
Yeah.
It is more like what kind of like value you could produce, and how how the thing that you build can um, develop sorry deliver benefit or value to a business problem. So it's more like solution oriented, um, rather well it's more like change it from like a solution oriented to like problem oriented, and more
Yep.
like whether you're like having a solution and looking for problems, to you have a problem, you find a solution to to solve the problem. So it is a bit more on the problem solving, in a high level, problem solving kind of like experience, and I've or problem solving kind of like skills that I would like to develop, not just a technical problem solving or debugging when you when your program doesn't work, but it's more like I have this kind of like business problem, how I could kind of like develop a solution to solve it, and also like the journey from kind of like I have this problem, and it's like very high level, a very kind of like chaotic and not refined, to how you could like break it down into step by step, how to make it more and more defined, so that you could actually take actions and to provide a solution step by step. So it's that's kind of like the whole defining a problem, and also like kind of like develop a plan to solve a certain problem step by step, and break the colossal things into like smaller chunks so that you could conquer, divide and conquer. And so it's like in a more like a business context. So that is something that I learn from my my role in consultant, and I found it tremendously useful and valuable. And again, it changed like the way of how I think, like how I changed the way that I was thinking from a different programming language. Similarly, I guess it's changed the way that I think in terms of like what I'm doing in the tech field. Like what am I doing here with the knowledge that I have from a technical point of view. And yeah, so that was an interesting experience. And I also another thing is that also kind of like you communicate with the client, so that it helped me to see how I could build up my communication skills. I know it's soft skills, and in tech probably often is overlooked, especially when you are like highly technical. But like the communication skills and how you kind of like convey your ideas, your solutions, and also like your outcomes to clients. That was like super useful. It's definitely I'm really glad that I kind of like switched to consultant at that point. So that's something that I would rather learn earlier than later in my career. And yes, and also I think in the consultancy I got to meet lots of like great people, and especially in the kind of like the community side of things. So previously, because like small startups, everyone is just kind of like highly just like build things and then ship things. Well, in consultancy, kind of like it's a different kind of a culture, a little bit different culture and vibe. People are more towards like community works. For example, like I can't change yourself, like having podcasts, and also like you have like Women Who Code. That's the group that you run. And also in the consultancy that I worked for, one of my colleagues was kind of like the host of the Women in MLDS Melbourne chapter. And yes, and then I was like lucky enough to get invited to be a panelist in one of the panel discussion. I think it's in the data science week in Melbourne or something like that. I got to be a panelist first time in my life. And that kind of like helped me to kind of like make a big jump to a bit more like a public speaking realm. And yeah, after that, I feel like, yeah, I could do more of this. And meanwhile, I also want to develop, keep developing my technical skills. Like, what would be the best to do both? I was like, maybe tech conference. So I decided that, okay, I'm going to speak in tech conferences from that moment on. So I start kind of like looking for tech conferences that I can speak, and and of course, and at the point that kind of like machine learning and also quite popular topics, and also like machine learning itself, and also kind of like machine learning operations. So so I kind of like I decided to do more tech conference speaking, and I just look for the conferences that's kind of like suitable for me, and it's especially for my level, because like it's a beginner level. And I found a few of this kind of like very community driven, community friendly tech conference in Melbourne as well as around Australia, and I love them. And I did quite a few kind of like conference speakings during my time in the consultancy. I really enjoyed it, and I feel like it's part of the community and part of like the knowledge sharing to a wider community, especially me as an immigrant, as a female in the tech industry. It's good to kind of to feel like you're part of something, and you could contribute to it, and also help others in a similar area to further advance in their career. So I felt great about doing that, and I really enjoyed it.
I think it is very true. And do you know what? Like, I mean, I never realized how associated consultings are to that community aspect. I mean, look, don't get me wrong, a lot of it is obviously the marketing and like, hey, we do things outside of this and we're really supportive. And I get a part of it, but like 95% of the reason that I wanted to come and work at Eliza when I was looking around jobs a couple of years, like a year ago or whatever, was because of Fiona running the chapter, and I'd met so many of the Eliza people in the community. And I was just like, no, this is where I want to be, because this is where all the cool people in AI are. Yeah. Like, as in, these are the people I want to work with. And it goes such a long way for those kind of things. And it really, I mean, yes, okay, they're doing that whole thing of getting into the community for the blah, blah, blahs. But the other aspect that you just mentioned that no one actually really thinks about is that communication, where like, even if it's the networking thing of like you're standing around like 50 people and you have to chat to them, it helps out with like 100 other things, whether you're talking to clients or in the future trying to explain your startup idea to other people. Like that communication skill is unparalleled, I think, in terms of like, if you're kind of like, hey, I'm not that great at it, honestly, go work in a consulting for a year, you will be great by the end of it. Like there's no way you don't get those skills.
Yeah, exactly. Because like you have to be, good at it. You're like trained. Because like you're gonna learn on the job. And I guess
Exactly.
yeah, and also like the other thing about like kind of like public speaking and be like community participant in community event is that you kind of like you still can be quite kind of like authentic to the topics or like to the thing that you talk about, and like it is your knowledge and like you share it. It can be quite like authentic in a way that less of, well, it is a two side of it. Some probably there's like a promotion element to it, but then also a big part of it is really about like the sharing and kind of like, and also kind of like help you to understand what you have learned and what your knowledge is. It is a good way to kind of like flesh out your thinking and flesh out your knowledge as well, because like feels like this kind of things, but when you actually go out and speak to like 100 people in front of 100 people, you want to make sure that you know every single thing. And also it's good way to also like to practice how you kind of like react and respond to certain questions, especially like when you go on a client side, like the client will ask you questions. And for public speaking is that because like, at the end of like your talk you would get asked questions, and I found it quite interesting, and I enjoyed it very much, is that before I go on a talk I would kind of like prepare the questions. I'll prepare some answers for those questions, and I think that also helped me to kind of flesh out my talk a lot better.
Yeah.
In terms of like to like the details and like the direction I want to go, and what kind of like things that people can learn. So yeah, it is like it's a good exercise to go through the whole thing, and definitely would boost my confidence in terms of like speaking in front of people and the way that I speak, and the logic, the kind of like the logical orders, and like kind of like the way the style that you speak as well, like how do you speak a bit more precisely, succinctly, even though I'm still learning trying to be better, but yeah, it definitely helped and I really enjoyed it.
I think I say this all the time. I do presentations on things I've never looked at before, mostly just as like an excuse to like actually learn the things that I kind of keep saying I'll look at some stage. Like it's like I
Yeah.
am such a procrastinator and I know it. So I'm like, I'll submit a talk and like some random thing. Like I think I did one recently where it was like cognitive search. I was like, I don't know anything about this, but I'm going to do a talk
Yeah.
in a month's time, so I have to figure it out. Because like
Yeah.
there's no other time way I'm going to be like, yes, let me spend a Sunday afternoon reading about cognitive search. I'm like, no, I won't. I know I won't do it.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. It's almost like you set a deadline for yourself to learn a certain things, and you might as
Exactly.
well get to tell everyone else that
That's
you learn this
literally
thing.
exactly it.
That, yeah, 100%. Same. That's like my mentality in terms of like public talking in the conference.
It
100%.
works so well, I think. It's such a
It
good
works
handy way to do
really
it.
well.
Like, so whenever people are
Yeah,
like, how do you keep up with all the things in tech? I'm like, I force myself to do presentations. So I have
yeah,
to read about
yeah.
them.
Yeah. And like if you don't do that, and you just like if you don't do that, you would just like you wouldn't literally go and look at it and try to do investigation, because you don't have a goal. Like you don't have a goal to kind of like that's where I want to go. But if you submit a talk and you have to do it, and you have to do it by a certain date, then you would just do it. So that's a
Yeah,
good way to
exactly.
motivate. It's a good way to motivate myself at least.
So you're in the consulting world and you're developing all these other things on the side, getting into the community, which I love. Anything about, I'm like, yes, this is great. More people in the community, please.
Yeah.
So how did that all wrap up? So, because we know you're now working at Campo, which is absolutely fantastic. And I feel like this is actually the second person I've had on that's worked at Campo at some stage.
Oh,
So
right.
it's really funny that that's worked out. But go on, tell me all about how that happened.
Yeah, so I think I did my consultant work, and be involved in the community, and kind of practice my communication skills, and also did like public speaking in tech conferences, and I feel like it's a point for me to again try something new. Every time I switch jobs, it's all about trying something new, and what I realized at the point that I haven't done in my career is to work in a big or large scale, fast paced modern tech company. That's
Yeah.
what I want to do because I was always like small company or like startups or consultants, not really like a big tech company. And so yeah, that's like that is something that I really wanted to try. At least like it's like on my career bucket list that I need to tick it off.
Yep.
And where else would you go for that in Australia? Canva. um, and yeah, and also I guess the other elements like because I'm from Eliza, we had a pretty good culture in terms of like diversity and inclusion, and so I have that, at the back of my mind that like, I also need the company to have a good culture for me to work in, especially to align with like my value, and also like align with like the culture that I or more or less like inherited from Eliza. So it's like diversity and inclusion and all that. So yeah, and Canva seems to be a pretty good fit for that profile. And if I can, so yeah, and I got like opportunity to try and see whether give it a go. And yeah, I think that is the main thing really for me is that I really want to work in a large scale tech company and see how I could again apply machine learning at a large scale because that is something that I haven't done. I have
Yeah.
done kind of like a bit more niche and like a bit more in depth in terms of advanced machine learning technology, but rather instead of like going the depth, like the breadth is something that I haven't really experienced, and that's something that I really wanted to try and see what it would look like because I would imagine that would be like different from what I have done, even though it's a similar field, probably similar technologies, methodologies, but it is just the user perspective, like user side of things, like how it can be used,
Yeah.
how it can be scale. So that is something yeah I haven't tried, and here I am still experiencing that, and yeah so far I'm really enjoying it.
Oh,
It's
it's
just
so cool.
different, it's different scene, but yeah.
Oh, I'm so excited about this. Like, I think it's such an interesting way of, and I kind of was like, as we were just chatting, I was thinking about this. I was like, if people are listening, they're like, Shin's been in technology her whole career. How is this an untraditional path? And I'm like, honestly, for me, it was more the fact that you did electrical engineering, which I think is just such a different thing. Because like I compare it to like my dad and stuff. I'm like, what? Like this is so non-technical sometimes, but it's the fact that it didn't start from tech. Like you've kind of learned everything you've done in terms of like the proper like the C++ and all these other like the Haskells and um machine learning in the first place. Like it's all kind of just been learned on the job as you've kind of gone. And I think that is a skill in and of itself, and it is a different pathway to take of like I'll meander my way into this world by just slowly picking it up and just keep going by finding other jobs that are in it. Like I think it's such a good way of like getting into technology, which is still untraditional, I think, anyway.
Yeah, like I guess in terms of like the path, like whether it's traditional or not, I wouldn't say it's traditional. I guess for me it's more like I always like navigate myself on the job, and also like in different industry and different kind of like setup, like whether it's like a startup or like consultant, or like a bigger company, and yeah, and try different things. Yes, like overall it is in tech more or
Yeah,
less. But kind of like there's like a lot of different pockets, a different way that we can
exactly.
navigate in tech, I guess.
Yeah, and I think it's important, and like I think it's a good example to set and something to listen to in terms of like, no, I wanted to try something new because I've done this, I'm okay with it, and it doesn't align with my values, or maybe I'm looking for something
Yeah,
bigger, or whichever it is. Like identifying those takes time for people usually. Which I mean, yes, of course, like you weren't leaving any of these jobs in 2 months anyway, and it took
yeah,
time. You got settled in and you appreciate it. I think you know what really stood out was when you were working with Haskell at the speech recognition stuff. Um,
yeah.
and you're like, this is so different. Like, this doesn't make sense. Like, why are you using this? Like, I don't understand. And like the amount of people that would have just been like, I don't agree with this and I'm gonna leave. But you stuck it out and you're like, no, I actually found a different perspective and appreciation for code. And I'm like, not a lot of people say that. It's a very interesting thing. I think it's a good one to hear, I think, specifically for this.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I guess for me it's just like me finding my way is kind of like try different things, not necessarily like big different things, but it's just like kind of like different things in a way that would change the way that I'm thinking, or the change the way that I think. I think that is like the different things in my definition, I guess, and also in my career, I suppose.
I absolutely love it. And I hope now that things are starting to open up that you get to do a bit more traveling to fill that whole foreign correspondent bits as well.
Yes.
Hopefully we can fill those kind of needs into the career at some stage as well.
Yes, it could be like I could just like go out and travel, like work during the day and then go out and do my
Exactly.
journalist at
Oh,
night.
I love it.
Yeah,
I keep a
hobby.
side blog going.
Yes. I'm seriously thinking about it. Yeah,
There we go.
yeah.
This is the new challenge in the next year, and maybe we'll see where it goes.
Yes, exactly.
I love it, and I think that's a great way to wrap it all up for today. Thank you so much for your time, Shin. I really do appreciate you jumping in and talking us all through everything that you've kind of gone through, and hopefully in the next year, maybe hearing about how you just career pivoted again into maybe journalism.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Akansha, to have me. And I had a lot of fun. Appreciate that.
Oh, I'm glad. That is like the best thing. When people are like, no, that was actually fun. I'm like, I got to think back. I'm like, yes, I had a great time, and I'm glad that you did too. So look, we'll leave it there. I'll put Shin's links and everywhere in the places. I'm sure she'll be happy for you to reach out, especially if you're looking to get into the community and stuff. Shin sounds like a fabulous person to help get your technical prezos on the way. So look, I'll wrap it up here. We'll be back again in 2 weeks' time with another episode. Until then, keep safe, everyone. Thank you for listening. If you've stuck it around this long, maybe look at the supporting the podcast page. It does take time to run this page, so help out if you can. And we'll see you soon.